Officially, John tells me I should tell my official name. So my official name is David Ross Herzog, and there is a little story in that. That when I was born, I was given the name David Ross Herzog, and the word Ross was put in there in deference to my grandfather, whose name was Joseph Ross Herzog. And the first time the family visited him in Brooklyn, and he said, "So how's little Ross doing?" My mother said, "No, David." He said, "No, Ross." And from then on, it was Ross Herzog. He did not want to have his grandson named David. So Ross Herzog is the name that I have been using personally and professionally, although whenever I come to official records, for example, when I signed a release on behalf of this taping, I signed David R. Herzog. I still have to do that. It causes me some confusion sometimes, but Ross Herzog is my name. And some family background. I'm one of 6 children. There are 3 boys and 3 girls in my parents' family. I'm the oldest of the 3 boys, and the 2 oldest sisters and younger sister and 2 younger brothers. My oldest sister has since passed away, and my family now is spread all over the country. I have family on the island, in Georgia, in Oregon, in many different parts of the country, so we are spread around. Both parents are deceased. I'm married to Carol. We've been married for 32 years. I met her in Brentwood at a Brentwood New Teachers Party, which was, we still both remember that vividly, the new Teachers Party where I met her. We have 2 children. My oldest son is David. Ironic, isn't it, that I should name him David? And he is currently a graduate of SUNY Buffalo and Fordham University with an MBA, and he's working for J.P. Morgan Chase in the city right now. He's just gotten a promotion, by the way. He's now an assistant vice president at J.P. Morgan Chase. And my younger son, Brian, he's 19, and he's going into his 3rd year at Stony Brook University. Both great guys, both terrific, and both doing extremely well, both in their jobs and in school. Brian, for example, just finished 2 years, 4 semesters at Suffolk, and he was on the dean's list. Not a great high school student, but turned out to be a great college student. And they're both doing great. Carol and I are too. We're both retired now. She retired last year. And life is good.
Personalities, how they differ, the children?
David was and still is a readiness kid. He always took his time going from one thing to the next, very careful about his choices, very deliberate. Brian, on the other hand, is just the opposite. He's a risk taker, always was, likes to find out things for himself, tends to plunge into things, and then if he needs to repair work, he backs up and straightens it out. He's a really experiential kid. So they are very different. And yet, even though they're 8 years apart, they're very, very close.
Where are you in your own birth order?
3rd of 6, and the oldest of 3 brothers.
Was there one or more sibling that really taught you something that you still follow to this day?
Well, I think of the 5 siblings I had, my younger sister Grace and I were the closest. And I think also in temperament, we're the closest. In terms of a specific idea or feeling or attitude or philosophy, I don't know, but we're both kind of laid back individuals.
Ross, what about the talents or the qualities or interests that have been demonstrated by your brothers and sisters and now by your children? Is there some thread that runs through in terms of a family focus or a family gift?
Well, I'd like to say there is, and there tend to be teachers in my family. I 2 aunts, and I was strongly influenced by my parents' sisters to go into teaching, and given all the cautions ahead of time about the things you need to be careful about and the things that you're going to enjoy about it and so on. And I think probably the thread in the family is more toward, I guess, a human interaction with people than technical. My oldest son's interest, for example, in finance is something that seems very alien to background. My youngest son, Brian, he's much more interested in psychology and social work, and that would seem to fit in with, I guess, the temperament within the family. My younger sister was a teacher for a while. My next oldest sister was a nurse, registered nurse, My eldest sister, who's now, as I said, deceased, she was very much interested in the arts. So that tends to be the strain in the family.
You have, do you see the boys very often, or?
My brothers, very seldom, actually. I don't see them much. My youngest brother, Michael, is a teacher.
Okay.
He lives upstate. He teaches in Salt Point, New York. He went to New Paltz. And I get to see him only a couple of times a year. And ironically, my younger brother, Fred, lives in the same town I do. We both live in Smithtown, but we really went different directions. And although we are very friendly and loyal to each other, we don't socialize together, so we don't really see each other very much, even though we are close. As a matter of fact, I was not home, but he called yesterday and spoke to my wife for 45 minutes. So now I find out what's going on because she fills me in on the phone call. We stay in touch, we're very close, but we don't really socialize together.
How long has your son been with Morgan Chase?
JP Morgan Chase? He's beginning actually his second year.
Okay.
He just finished his MBA program in May of last year at Fordham, and this was his first year, and he's graduating actually this week. This coming week, they'll have some sort of graduation ceremony in the organization, and he's starting in his second year. And as I said, they liked him, and they immediately gave him a promotion to assistant vice president. So he's real proud of that.
Now let's
as I am.
You were born what year?
1940, John.
Okay, all right. Another Roosevelt baby, and the birthplace where?
I was born in Belrose, New York, just over the Nassau-Queens border. Grew up in Floral Park.
At home or in a hospital?
I was born in a hospital.
Is it still there?
I don't know.
Okay.
Matter of fact, I don't even know the name of the hospital.
Okay.
But not at home. None of the kids in the family were born at home. We were all born.
What are some of the earliest memories you have of Belrose?
Actually, Belrose, none, because we moved out of there when I was just a young kid, probably just 2 or 3 years old. I remember most Floral Park. That's where my formative years would have been. I grew up in Floral Park. And I have some very vivid memories of that. One place, for example, we lived close to was Belmont Racetrack. And Belmont Racetrack was probably a mile or so from our house. And as kids, we used to spend time at the track. Of course, bicycles up and down the street all the time. It was a 60 by 100 neighborhood. And it's still there, as the original house is. Carol and I have been by it recently, and the house is still there. So it was a typical urban, suburban neighborhood that we grew up in.
What was your mom's maiden name?
Her name was Mary Frances McGuire. And my wife's name was Carolyn Brady, so it kept it in the family.
What about your mother's family history and your family history? Do you have any idea what preceded?
Well, they grew up in Brooklyn.
Mm-hmm.
My mother's father died quite young, and I think a year or two after she was born, he passed away. So she has no recollection of him, nor do I. In Brooklyn.
In Brooklyn. What part of Brooklyn?
Bay Ridge.
Oh, yeah.
Fort Hamilton Parkway. I understand that 25% of Americans can trace their heritage back to Brooklyn, and we're one of those people that can do that. And so she grew up in Bay Ridge area. My father was born at Flatbush, and his parents grew up there as well. We've been able to trace our Irish side of the family, my mother's side of the family, back to Ireland, I think about 3 generations. But my mother's parents also grew up in Brooklyn. So we don't have any close relatives, for example, in Ireland, nor in Germany, where my father's father came from, or France, where my grandmother on my father's side came from. My grandmother's name was Kramer, and she was French. And so it's kind of a mixed bag, as many immigrants are. My only recollection in terms of family background is essentially the United States.
Right. Okay. You never made an attempt to visit over there?
No, but we are on September 7th.
Really?
Carol and I are going to Ireland on September 7th for 10 days.
And where will you visit?
Well, we're probably not going to visit places where I have some background, and I don't think she has any recollection of her own in Ireland, but we are going to do, I guess the first trip we're going to take is the traditional tour of Dublin and Southern Ireland and Shannon, Limerick. Just the names, just listening to the names is musical. So, yeah, we're going to spend 10 days in Ireland.
So you have yet to do a German or a French?
No, but that'll be next. I'm anxious to go to France and to Germany. So once we make the first trip.
What about some beautiful memories of your mother? What did she enjoy doing? Some of her.
Well, she was something of a cultural nut, which was interesting because my father had no tolerance for it at all. When they both retired, I think sadly, is that they didn't have a lot to share because she wanted to go to the theater. She was interested in opera, in ballet. And my father, who grew up in the business of plumbing and heating, which is something he taught me, and my brother, who's in the business now, his interests were very different. He was interested in the Dodgers. And it was a passion more, I guess, out of a hate for the Yankees than it was as a matter of fact, my father played minor league ball when he was a kid. Sometimes pitched as many as 2 or 3 games on a Sunday afternoon. He was an outstanding pitcher. And so their interests were not really the same. So he would just as soon sit and watch, in his later years, a Mets game. He became a big Mets fan when the Dodgers left town and they took down Ebbets Field. But my mother would much prefer to go to a concert.
What was it like growing up in a household of 6?
Crazy. You know, then and still now, even though we don't see each other for months, maybe years, we get together and it's like yesterday. We bond very quickly and we're very loyal to each other. But when you're growing up, it was, how did my mother ever do it? I don't know, especially raising 2 kids. Wow, that's hard for us. How my mother and father raised 6 is a miracle. But the trick behind it was that we cared for each other. In other words, parents taught the older ones to take care of the younger ones. But I do remember, especially between my sisters, it seems to me they were at it all the time. Over everything. Clothes, magazines, boyfriends.
Strong personality.
Yes, all of them. All of them strong personalities, And it seems we were at it all the time. Myself and my younger brother, Fred, he and I used to fight all the time. I mean, not just argue. We used to punch each other around. So it was a little crazy with 6 kids, and I don't know how people manage it today.
Did your grandparents live in Brooklyn at that time? Right.
Yes, they did.
So you visited frequently?
Visiting was always an occasion. I still remember the hum of the bridge on the Belt Parkway. On our way over, we'd all wait for the humming bridge. And we'd go over the bridge. We knew we were on our way over or on our way back. So we used to visit Brooklyn, be either in Flatbush or in Bay Ridge when we were kids. As a matter of fact, my father's father lived, as I said, in Flatbush, and his son lived on the same street, which was, I met him at Flatbush Avenue. He was the last white man to live on that block. He was a fireman, New York City fireman. My father's brother was a New York City fireman, because the neighborhood obviously changed in the time that we moved down. But we used to visit them all the time.
Family, certain holidays were big?
Sure, particularly birthdays. On Christmas and New Year's, Easter, things like that, people usually came to us. But we always went into Brooklyn for birthdays, things of that kind. We were in the city probably once every few months.
Ross, was there an adult outside of the family? I think you answered this before, but your career choice, it was strongly influenced by your mother's sisters, you said.
Yes, my father's. My father's sister, Grace, was a teacher, kindergarten teacher. And I have a wonderful quick story about that. And my mother's sister, Kay, was also a teacher. And some of their friends were teachers, and they were friends of my family, and so I knew them too. A woman named Virginia Carr, who lived over on Eaton's Neck. I spoke with her a couple of weeks before I started teaching, and she told me about the fire drill. You know, you can't hit kids. But a fire drill is a safety situation. And she used to keep a list on her desk. You're on the fire drill list. It's a true story. And when fire drill came around, everybody up. I'm the last one out, you know. No, Mrs. Carr, no. And then she used to smack him in the back of the head on the way down the stairs. You know, close your mouth, hurry up, follow directions, bang, bang. And that's how she meted out her discipline. All in good nature, you understand. All in fun. And my Aunt Grace, who was a kindergarten teacher, my father's sister, some of her former children had a 25th reunion with her. And they came back to visit her kindergarten class, 25 years after they left kindergarten. And they had an afternoon after school let out where they all went back and played in sandboxes and painted. And, you know, and these are stories that I heard. And I'm sure that has something to do with my choice.
When did you know what you were going to do? How old?
I didn't really know until after my first year. It was something that I kind of fell into. I think I want to do this. I think it'd be a good idea. When I went to college, actually I had an English teacher who was not a good teacher, but a man I really came to admire in high school, who was my sophomore and junior high school English teacher. And I liked him. And I learned a lot from him. I had a great admiration for language and literature through him. And so I went to college. I figured, well, maybe I'd like to be an English teacher. But it wasn't until after my first year of teaching I figured, well, actually it was probably my second. My first year was horrible. I hated it. You know, I was just not prepared for it. And I had no student teaching. I had no certification. I came in off the street, as it were, as far as the teacher's concerned. And I learned, by the seat of my pants. And first year teaching, I went home day after day saying, oh, I can't stand this. I hate this. And the second year I said, I'm going to go back. I'm sure I can do it better. And after my second year, I said, wow, this is for me. I love it. And never look back.
You've made many decisions in your life, beginning perhaps with, certainly in the profession, beginning with that.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of them were tough ones. But what's the toughest decision you've ever had to make?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind is not decisions as a teacher. Well, I'll think about that. But certainly the hardest decision that I've made in this profession is as an administrator, and that is to let somebody go. You know, when somebody no longer, in your opinion, belongs in the teaching business. And now that I think about it, the first hard decision I had to make is when I had a student teacher. When I was in the junior high school, where I was for my first 4 years of work at South Junior High School. And I had a student teacher, and she just wasn't meant to be a teacher, and she was having a very difficult time. And I eventually had to say to her, I don't think this is the business for you. And I really stressed over that. I had a very hard time with that. And you know, it never does get easier. Never does. And fortunately, there aren't too many people that I found myself that I had to say that to. But I ran into her a year later. She was working in a Borders bookstore. Ross, Susan, how are you? And we got into a conversation. She said, thank you. It's the best thing that ever happened. She said, I really didn't want to be there, and I'm glad you told me. Well, when you're not happy in the classroom, it shows. It's a very hard job, and it shows. So she was not happy.
What was your first paying job?
Caddying.
Mm-hmm.
I caddied as a kid.
Mm-hmm.
From about 14 years old, I guess.
Did you play golf when you were a kid?
I played golf after I started to caddy. I rode my bicycle up to the golf.
How old were you at that point?
14.
Okay. Oh.
Yeah. Everybody in our family always worked as kids. As soon as you could walk out the front door, you got a job of some kind. So I caddied.
What were your favorite subjects in school? Yeah, and your least favorite too?
I hated math. I was never good at it. I'm still not. But my favorite subject probably was English. And in high school, French. I enjoyed French. And I found myself enjoying languages. Didn't like social studies a whole lot, but I loved language and I loved English. and French, as I said.
Over the years, there have been many birthdays and many holidays. Can you remember a particular toy that either of your parents or together they gave you?
Gene Autry 6-shooter. I had an outfit.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, there are pictures someplace in the family album. I do remember that.
What was your favorite season of the year? What is your favorite season?
I think the fall, actually. I just love the fall.
Is there an aroma that signifies family?
Interesting questions, John. Is there an aroma in the family?
No, is there an aroma that signifies family, that means family when you smell it? You think of family, or growing up family.
Probably roast beef. My mother, the Irish, excuse me, Irish folks, but Irish, did you ever see an Irish cookbook? No, I don't think I've seen one. I've been to Irish restaurants, but they usually copy food from somebody else. But in my family, some distinctive aromas coming in the house would be liver, tongue. If there are any children watching this, believe me, those things do exist. But roast beef. We used to have roast beef about once a week, and my mom used to make. I could smell roast beef coming in the house, into the kitchen, and sometimes cabbage. Believe it or not, and I remember cabbage. But
and what's the aroma today that you most dislike?
Actually, ironically, I like liver. That I most dislike. Although it tastes great in pina coladas, I cannot stand the thought of coconut. I cannot stomach that for some reason.
How about the schools that, in order, chronologically, you've attended from the first day of school?
As a youngster, I grew up in Flora Park, as I said, and I went to all parochial schools. I went to Our Lady of Victory parochial school from grades 1, didn't have kindergartens at the time, 1 through 6. Then we moved to Huntington. I was in St. Patrick's Elementary School in Huntington for grades 7 and 8. Then I went on to St. Dominic's in Oyster Bay, which is still around. And I did my 4 years there. Good school, and I enjoyed it. I worked my first year out of high school. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. And then after my first year out, I decided working out in the cold doing plumbing and heating was not something I really enjoyed. So I decided to go to college. And I went to St. John's University for 5 years on a 5-year plan, which both my boys apparently are going to adopt. The older one was in Albany Buffalo for 5 years. And then when I graduated St. John's, I started in Brentwood right away. And then, of course, I went on for my master's and certifications, and that included Hofstra University, where I got my MA. CW Post, where I had a sabbatical leave, which is almost, I guess, non-existent now on a public school level. I had a sabbatical leave, thank you, to Brentwood, where I went to Post for 36 credits in theater arts. American University for some courses, NYU, CW Post, as many people do. You go to different schools to get the certification requirements that you need. So
where are you now, credit-wise?
I don't know.
Yeah. Stop counting.
It's really BA plus the second master's. I don't know.
You have 2 masters.
Well, the second didn't actually turn into a master's degree. I didn't actually finish the production thesis, but I did the 36 hours.
Okay.
So I had been appointed again as department head at the high school and didn't have time for both, so I couldn't finish up the thesis.
Are there teachers from your elementary and secondary experience that you remember?
Elementary, of course, anybody who went to Catholic elementary school will never forget that experience. And so Sister Joseph and Sister Mary Francis from elementary school. High school, I remember my French teacher, Sister Marie Emmerich, who happened to be still living at our 25th reunion. She had no idea who I was. I didn't know if she knew anybody, really, but she was alive at the 25th high school reunion. And I liked her, not only because of the French, but she was head of the student council and the yearbook, and those are things I was involved in when I was in high school, and I have good memories of her. This English teacher I had, his name was Mr. Carboy, who influenced me in high school as an interest in being an English teacher. Sister Pierre was our social studies teacher in high school. college, I had some outstanding English professors at St. John's. Dr. Franzetti, Dr. McCormick, Dr. Johnson, some superior teachers there. And I really took on a love for the language and literature through them. In fact, I got an alumni bulletin once from Dr. Johnson, who was still living when I was well into teaching, and I wrote him a letter, and he wrote back. I couldn't believe it, but he remembered me. He even remembered an article I'd written for the Literary Journal. I was amazed.
I don't know if you can answer this question. It's a tough one, because there's been a lot of bad days. What was the worst day of your life?
As a teacher? Or
Any way you want to answer?
Well, the real worst day of my life, I'm going to pass on.
Okay.
You know, that's personal, and I don't think I want to share that. Worst day of my life. I tell you, I can't remember.
Okay.
Yeah. If there was one, there probably is, but
okay. So
memory is kind, John.
You betcha. Turning to the positive, what year did you first come to Brentwood?
I came to Brentwood in the summer, probably August, late, of 1964.
Okay.
I had no job. And
Why Brentwood?
Well, I'm not sure if I saw this in the newspaper, but I think I did. But I think I saw it in the newspaper that Brentwood was hiring teachers. I had some idea of Brentwood by reputation, that it was a difficult school district to teach in because of the population. But I had no concept of what that was. I truly didn't. As I said, I'd done no student teaching. And so my first interview was with Charlie Swenson at North Junior High School. He did not have a position for an English teacher, but he picked up the telephone and he called up some guy named Mike DeBellis, who was principal of South Junior. And Mike had a position available. And I went over and interviewed. I have a feeling that St. John's University rang a bell with Mike, because the first thing I remember, he smiled when I said that. And about half an hour into the interview, I have the job. Which
Had you gone any place first?
No.
Do you remember any of the questions that were asked in the interview?
No.
Okay. All right.
No, I don't.
But you knew a half hour.
I will tell you this, that I've often put myself in the opposite position, sitting inside of Charlie Swenson's head or Mike DeBellis' head, and I had to say something like, "This is impossible. How could we can't hire this guy?" I really, what they saw. Thank God they saw something, I guess, that they wanted to find out more about. But I did not, I thought, come to the job with a whole lot to offer. But apparently they had some reason to want to hire me, and they did.
So you got the job.
I did.
First impressions of Brentwood and the district, now that the reality's been tested.
Well, the people in Brentwood, the teachers as well as the administrators, when I started at South, were just phenomenal. They were wonderful. One that's still around that does substituting is Pete Demento. He was the assistant principal at South at the time, and they were absolutely great in terms of mentoring new teachers, of which we had many. The turnover in the district was tremendous, as it is now. And so my impression was that everybody was out there to help you, and very easy to get along with, unpretentious. All of us were in the same situation, and a lot of young teachers, so we helped and supported each other.
I'm curious about what you just said. You said that there is a turnover now.
Yes, there is. Well, recently, yeah, there's been a turnover. First of all, because of retirements.
Okay.
That because of the heavy retirements, population has gone back up. It's continuing to climb. At one time, Brentwood had about 22,000 students at its peak,
yes.
And it's well into its mid-teens again. And one of the things that I have found, which I find a little bit disturbing, is that teachers who are coming now, not as many of them are staying. My experience earlier in my career was that when people came to Brentwood, they tended to stay. But I found more teachers, and of course that was only my perspective, but more teachers are coming, finding out that they don't want to teach, or they don't want to teach in Brentwood, and want to try someplace else, that the turnover of people coming and then leaving after a year or two seems to be picking up. But I guess turnover, when I say originally, turnover in the beginning, that's probably the wrong term. The staff from year to year was 25% different, but mostly because it was growing so fast that you were finding new teachers coming into the district all the time.
We used to refer to ourselves as a microcosm of the whole country. Do you think that's still true? If it ever was true.
I don't see where that's true at all.
Okay.
I think Brentwood in some respects is unique, which is why I loved it. I don't think we are a microcosm. Microcosm would be a small, mostly white school in the middle of the United States, where things are generally pretty quiet. And that was never the case in Brentwood. I think we might be more accurately described as a microcosm of the world. It's an international school district. And if you want to, I owe Brentwood so much because of what I learned as a person from dealing with people who were, quote, different from me, with my parochial white background. I owe Brentwood a great debt for teaching me about the world, about different nationalities, different religions, different races, different points of view. I mean, you wouldn't survive in Brentwood unless you were open to the differences. And I don't think that's a typical American school.
Grades you taught, subjects you've taught, positions you've held, certifications perhaps.
Okay. Well, I started in junior high school and I taught 8th and 9th grade, the 4 years that I was there. I'd always thought that I wanted to teach high school, and that's where I first thought I would go. And so I started in junior high school, and the first thing I tried to do was to teach 8th graders Samuel Taylor Coleridge, and that didn't work. And so I made some changes, thank God, because that was highly inappropriate. But it's what I'd learned. I thought that's what they wanted to know. And then after 4 years, I transferred to the high school because I thought I'd wanted to teach high school. That's what I originally had intended. And so I was at Brentwood High School for 20 years. And in those 20 years, 16 of them were teaching. And of those 16 years teaching English to 10th, 11th, and 12th grade students, 8 of them I served as department head of English. I was English department head when I moved there from 1968 to 70. And then off and on a couple of times I was department head of English until my last 4 years of teaching. I was department head for 4 years, and then I became an assistant principal in 1984, 1988, I think it was. 1988, I became the assistant principal in the Sondling building. And I was assistant principal there for 4 years. And then I was transferred to North Junior High School for 2 years as an assistant principal there, working with Mark Neisowitz and Jose Suarez. And then I became a principal in 1990. And in 1990, I went to East Middle School as the principal at East Middle, and that's my final 12 years in Brentwood were at East Middle School. Certification and so on. I have BA in English from St. John's, MS in English at Hofstra, and as I said, my certifications are essentially teaching basic English certification, permanent, and I guess certifications for as far as administration is concerned, up to a district superintendent.
And you were also super involved with a lot of other things.
Yeah.
I mean, you had these assignments, but you had activities and programs.
I did. You?
Yeah.
Got a couple of years. When I was at South, I was involved in, I did student council, the yearbook, drama club, and I was BTA delegate from the building. And I'd never had background in theater, and it was just something that happened. A young man who has since left Brentwood, but whom I think of fondly all the time, Ken Moss, was also a fellow English teacher at South, and we had mutual interest in there. He had a lot of background in theater, and I started doing plays there. So when I went to the high school, I continued that interest. I did a number of the high school musicals and what they called at the time senior plays. I did several yearbooks with Rich Edwards and we did those together. I was involved in the student council as well. When I became a department head, of course, I joined the principals organization, Brentwood Principals and Supervisors Organization. I worked on a number of committees for them, professional growth committee, negotiations, things of that type. So a lot.
What do you do in your spare time?
My wife asks me that question sometimes. You coming home? I loved what I did, and I loved working with the kids, so it really wasn't a labor. It wasn't hard to do.
So you had lots of different job descriptions, Ross, but you had a purpose throughout that probably remained consistent.
Well, I loved the kids. I loved working with kids, and that's that contact with others was. It's very self-serving in a way because it was a personal high. For me, I just felt so. I got so much reward personally out of working with kids, and this is probably the reason I came to Brentwood and stayed was because I really felt that I could do something for them, to help them, to share with them, and they needed me, I felt, and they were very grateful for it in the sense that, you just got a sense of appreciation. All kinds of hassles working as a teacher, but never that they didn't appreciate what you did. And
Do you hear from anybody?
Yes. Matter of fact, there's one particular group. Well, our attorney is a former student, and you'll find many of us in Brentwood who have ongoing relations with people, either personal or professional. There's one group that graduated, I think, in the year 1976 or 7. There was about 10 of them as a group that we still keep in touch with. And
was that your favorite year?
For me, it was, I guess, for that group, because I was very much involved. It was a year around the time when I directed the play Hello, Dolly and a number of senior plays. And you get very close on an emotional level when you work with kids at that level. And so we did get close, but there was something also unique about them, and other people that I know as teachers also had interactions with those same kids who formed the same bonds with them. They were a very special group that came out of East Junior High School. They stayed together in the Ross building.
You must have bonded with your colleagues that you began working with, too.
Mm-hmm. I did.
Are you still in touch with some of them?
Yes, I am. For example, Frank Carnesi, who has retired recently, he knows this group of which I speak because he was very close to them as well. And Steve Howland, of course, knew them. And he was the principal there at the time when they went through that school. And there are a number of us that continue to keep in touch with these kids because they were a special group of kids.
Did you ever have to, I'm wondering, you mentioned BIPSO, did you ever have to call upon BIPSO or even PTA for that matter to help you with something, a problem that you had along the way, or your family?
Well, as far as the family is concerned, I don't recall personally if we had a family situation that we needed either organization's help with, but I know from my experience working in the district that organization, whether it was the Teachers Association or the Principals Organization, that they were always there to help you. And that's one of the very special aspects about Brentwood that many people, I'm sure, have shared with you, and I know that you probably feel the same way, that if there was ever a problem in your family or with you personally, and it became known, as a matter of fact, you didn't have to share it. Someone was there to pick it up, and they would ask you, is something wrong? Do you need help? And it could be a small personal problem, which they weren't trying to pry their way into your business. But if you needed something, the people in Brentwood were always there for you. And professionally, if I had circumstances too as a principal where I needed the support of my principal's organization, and I got it. I don't think I can ever say that I had a circumstance where I needed the support of either organization and didn't get it.
But there came a point when you decided it was time and you submitted your papers and then retired.
Yep.
What date officially was that?
July 1st, 2002 was my official retirement date. That was my last working day The last working day was June of 2002.
If you take a look back over your entire career, was there some accomplishment that you were particularly proud of? There's lots of things, and
There are. Yeah, there are many.
Then for the sake of the question, just maybe.
Well, I'd have to say one that always comes back, and I guess it's where my heart was the deepest, and that was my involvement with kids when it came to theater and doing the plays. That really is where I spent most of my energy, most of my caring about was working with kids, not just productions. For example, Frank Carnesi and I one summer. Two summers worked with Jeff Wolf, who's a name that may ring a bell with you, as a social studies teacher. We worked under NDEA, National Defense Education Act, and funding through Arts and Education, and we did summer workshops for kids in theater arts, including taking kids to shows in the city, as well as doing improvisational theater and speech work and fencing and all kinds of things. And it was a joy to do that kind of things with kids, and they loved doing it, and they were very appreciative. And one experience that comes to mind about that you can smile at now, but we took about 60 of these kids in to see the Fantastics at the Sullivan Street Playhouse one summer. Matter of fact, 125 seat house, and we had 80 of the seats. And our kids needed that kind of experience. And a case in point is when we broke and went out on the street for the intermission, there was a vendor selling all kinds of things. And of course our kids, they bought. And they came back in and they sat down for the second act. And I won't give you a last name, but George sat in the front row. And between me and you is as much room as between the front row and that stage platform. And in the beginning of the second act, George opened a bag of potato chips. And I don't know how El Gallo felt, but I froze. I wanted to kill George. And so, George, if I could burn a hole through him just looking at him. And afterwards, George learned something on that trip. He did. George learned something, as they all did. And there were hundreds of experiences like that, where they're just, and I'll use the word naive. They're naive about what it means to be in circumstances like this. And if there's anything that I felt that we would try to generate in kids was curiosity.
What was the total number of years then that you were in public education?
Public education, 38 years. Yeah. It's been 40 years since I started in Brentwood.
Did you ever have any second jobs?
Not outside of education.
Not outside.
No, I taught summer school. Yeah. I taught night school.
Okay.
Did those kinds of things.
Do you remember the first year's salary before taxes?
$5,000. I think it was $5,800. $5,800. I think was my first year.
What was your reason for leaving after all those years? Why?
Well, I knew I wasn't going to be in the job forever. Sooner or later, your life comes to an end. But I didn't want to have it end while I was still working. There were many things that I still wanted to do. I had a family. My youngest son was graduating from high school in 2002. My wife was interested in retiring when she was 55, which was in 2003. It's kind of like an astrological thing. All the stars came together at one point. And it wasn't because I never left because I said, I hate this, I'm going to go now. I want out of here. I could very well have come back and done more if I had the time. But I had an agenda of things that I wanted to move on to.
In life, yeah.
And it was time to take on that next stage of life.
What do you miss most about active service?
Well, I miss the people a lot. I'm in contact with people in Brentwood frequently, and both of us are. For example, Carol and I went to the recent board meeting in July. Okay. We still have an interest in the people and in the activities of Brentwood. We follow the newspaper all the time. So, I miss a lot of the people in Brentwood.
There are things you don't miss.
Yes. Coming back to school after a secondary principals meeting with about 8 pounds of books from Ann Primavera and all kinds of mandates from the superintendent and the secondary supervisor about things that we had to do. And where are we going to get the time for all these things?
Was there something, Ross, that you would like to have accomplished that you just couldn't get done before you left?
Yes, and it's it had to do with a grant that we had at East Middle School in the last few years that I was there. Through the work of a number of people, we were able to get a federal grant for a 3-year program to try to turn around the needs for our kids in terms of math and language achievement. As it is now, Brentwood's 4 middle schools are all on that commissioner's list of schools where kids are not achieving as well. And I would very much like to have been able to say, for East Middle School's sake, our kids were able to accomplish enough to get off that list. And we didn't, and I regret that. I would like very much to have had that happen.
I'm going to try to ask you a couple of questions in the few minutes that remain, so bear with me if I sound like I'm rushing you. I don't.
That's all right.
Mm-hmm. If asked to predict 3 changes needed in public education in this district.
Well, first, the notion of equal opportunity education is a lie. That's not true. Recently, you'll take a look at a place like Brentwood, which spends about $12,000 per head. And we managed to squeeze that money out of the school district. And someplace else has got the place like Manhasset, and they'll spend $23,000. That the inequities in education in terms of funding is horrendous. That's certainly one thing that I would change. I think mentoring of teachers is critical, and I think we need to spend a lot more time at officially mentoring teachers.
Okay.
And I think we need to give our kids a lot more opportunities in the area of cultural education.
So therefore, there's a good segue. Finish the statement. Today's students are?
Today's students. We're talking about Brentwood students or students in general? They've got a real struggle on their hands. The typical Brentwood student, to be successful in the 21st century, has got a lot of work to do. And I'm afraid they'll be left behind.
And you would complete the following phrase how? Brentwood teachers are.
Great.
What advice would you offer teachers beginning in the district today?
Never lose touch with the fact that you're teaching kids, not subjects.
And here's the last one for you.
Okay.
If God exists and was listening to our questions and answers.
Is this Channel 44, John? Yes.
No.
Actor Studio?
I tried not to replicate it.
If God exists.
No, if God exists and was listening to our questions and answers, what do you hope someday he will say to you about your life lessons in Brentwood?
You did a good job.
Okay. And you did a good job here today. Thank you, Ross.
Thanks, Joe.
For being with us.
Thanks, Carm.